Well, good morning, and it's Saturday morning, something very, very different. I'm TV, he's Oscar D'Souza, and this is Property Avenue WA, episode 19, and I just realised our little promo ad, I've done a new one, but I had problems this morning on the old. We're not doing Wednesdays anymore. We're going to give it a go on Saturday mornings, as we say, a cuppa, join us. And if you've got any questions about property matters, then we'd love to hear from you. Be it you can go via YouTube or Facebook, and you can text us and chat to us, or you can send through a text on 0437 993294 if you want. We're really getting technical. So, but yeah, look, it's been a big week, mate. How was your week?
Yeah, mate, big. It's just we've just got a really, really strong market over here in WA, which is different from other parts of the country. So business is busy, operations is busy, everything's really, really busy for us. It's great.
Yeah, I must admit, phone calls and whatever, I've had I don't think Jude realised how many phone calls I get and when they start until she came up to Geraldton last weekend, and it's been a busy week and had a few other personal things to sort out as well. So all of a sudden it's Friday, next minute it's Saturday morning. So so this week what we're going to do, just so you know what we're going to be having a chat about, OD, of course, we always like to get his view on the market and what's been going on, and a few stats and a bit of info, which he's always got on hand. Then we're going to do some have a look at some of the topics of the week, perhaps, but more importantly, the rental market. It's going through the roof here in WA, and we're bucking the trend as far as what's happening in the rest of Australia. There's been a variety of articles about different things about the property market in different papers and different mediums. So we'll go through that. But also the fact of the investment opportunity. Is this investment opportunity in WA? Some people are thinking it is. Certainly we'll have a chat about that. OD's got a few little bits and pieces that he wants to talk about, and some facts and figures that he got to chatting with a couple of friends this morning at 5:30 while I was walking along the river front there this morning doing his little walk. I've done my push-ups. We're ready to go. We also want to know what's going on with the impact on the buyers and the sellers as far as all this is concerned. Is this a plus? Is this a minus? Is it increasing the values? And is it a market to buy and sell? So those are some of the things that we're going to try and cover. And importantly, we've got an if question. We always like to have an if question. So we'll keep that to the end. OD, I think it's over to you, mate. What's been happening in the week as far as stats and figures and what's going on with the marketplace?
Cool. Well, we, as you just said before, TV, the show is going to be dominated by the rental market, because it's super, super hot at the moment, very topical. So really encouraging landlords this morning, either landlords or people that know landlords, or just want to have any inquiry so far as the rental market and how it's going here in WA, maybe even the challenges that they're having with property managers. So certainly start sending those questions in, rental-based questions. However, sales market, let's quickly touch on that. Over the week, there has been 834 sales through the Perth metropolitan area, which is still a very, very strong market in comparison to 12 months ago. We were 511 sales for the same week 12 months ago. So as we know, 500 to 600 sales is a pretty normal, consistent market for WA, or rather for the Perth metropolitan area. But this week, just gone, is 834 sales. So it just continues to be a very, very strong, buoyant market with lots and lots of activity. Something that's of note, though, is that whilst we've consistently had between 800 and 900 sales over the last couple of months post-COVID, it actually touched 1,000 sales in a week. But whilst we've consistently had 800 to 900 each week, a large portion of that has actually been made up of land sales, particularly 4 to 6 weeks ago, when the government had these stimuluses or rather grants for building. And we actually saw, so of the 800 or 900 sales that we had, say, 4 weeks ago, approximately 25 or 30% of that was actually made up of land sales. As at now,
right.
yes. So it's dropped off a little bit in terms of the land sales. We're still selling 800 to 900 properties a week, but in comparison, for the last 834 sales of this last week, 589 of them were house sales, established house sales, and only 124 of them, I think, were actual land sales. So we're seeing a bit of a drop off there in land sales, which we'd expect to happen. But yeah, I just wanted to make that comparison. Listings, all the real estate agents are reporting that they've got low listing stock because of the high activity in transactions. Listings are stable at about 10,800 listings in terms of what's available in the market. And in contrast to where we were at 12 months ago, there was 14,127 in the same week, 12 months ago. So we're down on listings, and that's why you see so many people at home opens. And for those buyers that are out there, they're probably missing out on a few properties. So there certainly is a shortage in supply. Moving over to the rental market, where there's even a greater shortage in the rental market. Last week we leased 770 properties throughout the Perth metropolitan area. Typically we're normally between 800 and 1,000 properties a week, but last week was 770. 12 months ago it was 1,010 properties, which is around about right in terms of our strong market, and 4 weeks ago it was 866. So we've actually seen a bit of a drop over the last month in terms of the volume of rental properties that have been leased. But I just want to make it very clear, that's not because we've got a softening rental market, it's because we've got a tightening in supply, and there just aren't as many rental properties around to lease at the moment, and there's not many coming onto the market. So with the office that I work with and all the other offices around Perth, there's many people coming to those viewings, to those rental viewings, and many applications coming in as well. So we absolutely have got a shortage in the rental market. Availability just over 3,000 through the Perth metropolitan area, and it was only a couple of years ago that figure was actually closer to about 10,000 rentals. So massive drop there. And my final stat for the week in terms of what's been happening in the property market is Geraldton. Obviously, is we always keep a bit of a track on the Midwest. When I was up in Geraldton and we had a massive oversupply of properties, that was at around about 300 properties available. It blew out to as much as 400 or 420 properties. And as at today, if you're after a rental in Geraldton, there are only 88 available.
Really? And last week that was 96. And someone asked me the question yesterday. I had a funeral for a friend of mine, and they said, TV, what's the story with the rental? And I said, watch tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and we'll give you more. But I reckon probably 92, 93, because I think the week before, so 2 weeks ago, it was down to below 100. I think it was 98, then it was 96, and now we're 88. That's not very, wow, that's low.
Yeah, and bearing in mind, I mean, if we're in contrast back to the Perth market, if we're leasing 800 to 1,000 properties a week, I know for certain there are not that many new properties coming onto the market. So we're gradually just seeing this decline in the rental market. And comparatively, when you look at Geraldton, you know, it wasn't long ago and it was 130, 140 properties. And we've seen over the last couple of months, each week, every time we log in, it's about 10 properties less. So, and that seems to be continuing. I reckon in a month's time, we might see that that's going to be at 50 or 60 properties, which is amazing to think that you could go into a town as large as Geraldton, and if you're after a rental, you've only got 50 options through the whole of Geraldton, and that includes
and I would imagine those options would be the problem with those low numbers is then your choice and your options are probably not going to be as varied as it would be. You may sort of just have to take what you can get, if you like.
Yeah, that's right. And that places, but I mean, of those 50 properties, TV, they're not all suitable. Some people need a family home. Some people need a 1 or a 2 bedroom unit. Some people have got pets or whatever. So even at the level that we're at now with 88 properties available, it's a highly limited market for those that need a rental property. So, and there's still people moving to Geraldton as well. So that even further depletes the supply. Unless there's some increase in supply pretty quick, that's just going to get tighter and tighter, and prices, well, I was going to say prices will go up. I think they've already started to go up just because there's such short supply but high demand.
Yep. Just a quick question too, or not so much a question, but just a little pointer. If you do have questions, you're welcome to ask any questions you may have. I also noted one of our old friends from Geraldton who did a bit of real estate in his time until he recently retired and moved to Mandurah, is one John Harvey. So morning, Harves. Good to hear from you. There you go. Keep going. Sorry, mate.
No, I haven't got anything. That's the end of my stats report for.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So it's really intriguing, and your reference with regard to land sales and identifying the split as far as that's concerned was intriguing, because there was an article which I've only read very briefly this morning in the West Australian, but it refers to how there's a photo of Mark McGowan and a few things about what's happening in the property market, but more particularly, they're estimating some $117 million they would have paid out for the $20,000 building stimulus that WA government have offered on top of the federal government. So, it's just, I've just had a little message to say that our vision is blurry, so I'm not quite sure why, because I've got the best camera I can get. So we'll just keep working along, and we do apologise.
When I look at my screen, I can see me clear, which is important. But when I'm looking at you, you do look like you look like fuzzy TV to me. So I don't know what everyone else is saying.
Don't be saying it right. I did my best too. Got a haircut this week. Anyway, so with regard to the rental market and what's going on, and we've identified Geraldton in particular, we'll definitely make an effort to get a property manager on board and discuss what's going on and try and get sort of a bit of a view about the regional areas. But when we talk about the fact that, and Geraldton is an example, but Perth's no different. And in fact, I'm sure WA as a whole. But the stats that I'm identifying is that the people that are, what's driving this rental market? The question that's been asked to me is, what's driving this? Where are all these people? Why has it suddenly become an issue about rentals? What have you observed, and what have you been able to get a hold of why that's occurring?
There's a few reasons that I know of, TV. One is the obvious, the migration side of things, and that is that people are looking to move into WA, and a lot of that is to do for employment reasons. So that's going to place pressure on the rental market, because you've got more people coming into a space where there were fewer people, and they've got to live somewhere. They're either going to buy or they're going to rent, and typically a stepping stone will be to rent first, either by the company that's bringing them in, or just making their own decision to rent. So the migration side of things is one angle. I think that there's also a side of things where there's an uncertainty in the market in terms of where people see the markets going, rather the economy's going. So because there's that unsureness amongst people, they're sitting there going, look, let's not hedge our bets on a buy. Like, has the market bottomed out? Let's just sit tight, and maybe we'll just rent for a while and see what happens. Then there's the other side, that obviously we've got a very strong sales market at the moment. And so I think in terms of that, people are finally saying, that's great, let's sell. Now's a really good time to sell, and it absolutely is. Either they sell with the intent on renting for 12 months and see what happens in the economy, so it's a strategic decision, or they sell and they actually sell their home much quicker than they actually thought that they would. So they're almost forced into the rental market because they're unable to go and buy the property that they want because it's either not available or they have to compete for it. So then they sit there and go, well, let's just go rent. And that places a further pressure on the supply in the rental market.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
There's a few.
Yep. Yeah. And I suppose you've also got the other thing being is people saying, hey, this package doesn't limit me to build. And you've got the one of our followers today where decided to retire and we'll take the opportunity of building. So they build. But in the meantime, they've got to rent while they're waiting for that because they've relocated. But the other thing that I've been was brought to my attention is the expats. So there's expats moving back to WA, and certainly like in Bali where they had to, the government over there won't renew the visas. So that Ryan Hadji just said, great work, gents. That's fabulous. Thanks, Rhino. But the expats have moved back to WA and identifying WA as being the place to be. So that's obviously got to add further pressure as well. So it's a very, very interesting time with regard to that side of things. But does that also then, is that a flow on with regard to providing an investment opportunity? Because another article I read was making reference, where is it? Quickly find it. But about investors, where they're delaying their retirement because of issues that are going on as their retirement funds. So people in their 50s and early to mid 60s. So the little grey-haired people here on the left of your screen, they are in that category. Are they all of a sudden the share market and other things perhaps not going quite how I planned? So is this suddenly become an avenue that they look at with regard to investment opportunity? Question, yeah. Not really an answer, but is it?
Yeah. Well, look, that's I'm glad you raised that in terms of, so what's fueling what's going on in this rental market at the moment, and what are the investors doing? So, as you said before, I went for my Saturday morning walk down at the Swan River, and I went with a good mate of mine he's one of Perth's best, most highly regarded and respected real estate agents through Perth. And so I went for a bit of a walk with him and we just caught up on all things real estate during the week. And so he's done an analysis of the people that are selling properties for him with him at the moment, and also where the buyers are coming from. And this is his stat. Now, just in terms of stats, one thing that's really important, and we touch on this every week because we hear stats which often are national stats. Sometimes they're actually eastern states-based stats, that isn't really reflective of what's going on here in Western Australia. So, and bearing in mind that with the statistics that we hear, 73.6% of all statistics actually have no foundation, including that statistic I just gave you, 73.6%. I just made that up. But that aside, I always look at...
I was just going to say, where did you get that from? And then you just admit it. Okay. Just as well I put the disclaimer, that disclaimer up there, isn't it?
It's really important to make sure that whenever we hear a stat, work out where is that stat coming from. So with this, I'm actually, as I said, I was going for a walk with the real estate agent mate of mine, and he gave me a stat based on actual on the ground what's happening with him right now. He said of his sellers at the moment, for every 10 properties that he sells, 5 of them are investors that are selling their investment properties. So not their own homes, they're selling their investment properties. Of the buyers of those 10 properties, only 1 to 1.5 of them are investors. So what does
really?
that? Yeah, only 1.5. So what he's saying is the investment market that's going on over there is that we've got some investors that are selling for whatever reasons. Some of them to reduce debt, some of them to retire, some of them because they've had enough of the real estate market. But those investors are not being replaced with the same number of investors. Only 1 to 1.5 of the 5 investors sellers, only 1 or 1.5 people buying are actually investors, which means that those properties are going to leave, that those 3.5 properties are going to be leaving the rental market because they're not getting picked up by investors. They're getting picked up by owner-occupiers.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's intriguing.
Yeah, you think about that over the next 12 months, that's going to place an even further pressure on the rental market because the supply is just going to get less.
Yep.
And not only that, like it's, if you think, okay, so that's going to create more of a pressure on the existing rental market, but at some point in time, as we see with every single selling cycle or every single market cycle, at some point in time, the return on investment for residential investors actually swings around to a point where they go, far out, that's really good. I need to, be involved in that because the return on my investment is really good. And we haven't seen that in the WA market probably since the GFC. But now we're seeing some conditions where our rental market's super strong, rents have started to go up, the supply is really low, probably going to get lower. At some point in time, people are going to start swinging around thinking that residential real estate is a really good investment again. And as we know, with every good investment, there's two components. One is the serviceability. So what rent are you going to get based on what it costs you to have it there? And the other really important fact with a good investment is we need to factor in capital growth, because if there's no capital growth factored in, all we're doing is paying the expenses with the rental income. It doesn't really make for a good investment. So you've got to have good serviceability and you've got to anticipate capital growth. And I really think we're right at that point now where both of those twos are actually big ticks. I think they're both big ticks.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was what I was going to ask with regard to this. I mean, the impact of all this, the rental market, what impact is that having on the marketplace? And is that, what impact is it having on buyers and sellers? And I suppose the biggest impact is values. And at the moment, there doesn't appear, from my observation, that the valuations have really changed. They certainly haven't gone down. But they don't appear to have gone up either. Was that your observation?
I reckon that's the statistics right at the minute, but I do not believe that'll be what the statistics show when this quarter finishes, and certainly finishes. I think the statistics are absolutely, they're going to show growth both in the average rental and the average sale price. Absolutely.
Yep. Hey, just we encourage people to ask questions, and it doesn't necessarily have to be what we're talking about right now. You may have a property question that's on your mind, and we'd like to think that we can discover the answers for you. If you do have anything, you're welcome to send a text, or alternatively, if you're watching the show, then you can chat live and just let us know what your question may be. Dean Stonehouse, Dino's a regular and also been a guest. He getting back to the reference about Geraldton in particular, he wanted to know, and I suppose this question could be asked across the board, is the Airbnb activity in Geraldton, and for that matter, is the Airbnb activity in WA, is still active? And are these properties, if not active, are these properties obviously, or suggest, being placed back into the rental market? Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah. Honestly, I am not across all the changes that happened in that short stay market so far as legislation is concerned, but I am across what's happened so far as the demand for those sorts of short stay places as a result of COVID. And so there was a massive influx over that COVID time, and even post-COVID, there was a massive influx of people that had those Airbnbs that were then not going to be filling them, and therefore were sitting there going, okay, well, what am I going to do? So we need to look at a more permanent residential tenancy alternative. And so that's absolutely what we saw in terms of inquiry into our permanent residential businesses as well. Yeah. So there's been a shift.
Yep. So getting back to the rental side of it, I suppose the question, and some of the articles I've been reading, and you see some things in social media, and you sort of, it's been a busy week, but you try and quickly browse through and pick up bits and pieces of what's, obviously because you and I do what we do, plus we have a bit of a passion for it. But If you're a tenant and you're looking for a property, and we heard the story, I think it was last week, where someone, I think the property was getting 410. They advertised it for 425. I think they had a queue of people, end up being 440, and then there were people offering an extra $10 just to get it above the 440. So suddenly a 410 rental became 450. Now that's not going to be everybody's affordability. So these tenants that are out there that are looking and are in those queues, and obviously being Saturday and Sunday, that's when people are not at work and therefore take the opportunity to try and get out and about.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you would suggest they need to perhaps do?
They just like the buying market at the moment for anyone that's wanting to buy a property, but even more importantly now for the rental market, because we've got an even greater supply issue, but we've got very strong demand. So no matter what, line up your ducks and put your best foot forward. What does that mean so far as a rental application is concerned? Get your references sorted out. When you're buying a house, it's get your finances sorted out. When you're renting a house, it's get your references sorted out. And that means your personal referees, that means your historical rental references, and it also means your employment references as well, because that's what a property manager looks at when they're actually making or processing an application in order to discuss with the owner whether you're going to be a good tenant or not. Just like when a buyer is sorting out their finance, trying to work out whether they're going to be able to obtain finance to complete the property purchase. So lining up the ducks and making sure that you're ready to go, because every single home open for a rental property that is priced correctly at the moment, we're not getting 2 and 3 people that are interested. We're getting people at the moment. We're getting multiple people to every home open. We're getting many applications on just about everyone, and people are even submitting applications for properties sight unseen at the moment because of that fear of missing out. So just line up your ducks before you even get to the point. And similarly, it is a market at the moment where people are paying an extra $10 or $20 a week just to secure it. So have a chat to the leasing consultant, have a chat to the property manager, and if you're dead set keen on a place with all your ducks lined up, you might inquire as to what you need to do to make sure that you're the front runner for it. And by that I mean have the conversation. So look, they're asking $420. Will I get it if I offer $430 now, or if it's at $435? Like, do whatever you need to, because if you miss out on that, then there's not that many more to choose from. So, and certainly not in Geraldton anyway. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, and of course we'd like to think there's maybe people that from the East Coast and not necessarily, obviously planning to come over here because of work. Decided, hang on, we've got to live here. This is just not going to get any better. So they all of a sudden decide, well, we won't buy at this stage, we'll rent. So that's that extra pressure, as you were saying earlier on. I had an interesting conversation, and I refer to, in this case, a landlord who I went out and played on that nice green grass on Thursday afternoon, and and I didn't get a hole in one.
Oh, almost?
No, not even almost. Not even almost. Very, very ordinary. But he sort of commented and sort of said, TV, he said, I've got my property in Perth and I'm just really frustrated because of all the restrictions and the issues that are happening with the tenant. And it's all about them and it's not about me. And it's costing me money. And I suppose there's that element, but I haven't heard too many landlords sort of have that problem. I mean, I'm sure there is that happening out there, but I'm not sure that I've heard that. You'd obviously more got your feet on the ground in that area, or your finger on the pulse, whatever the term is. But what's your observation? Have you heard much about as far as that's concerned?
Well, there's 2 things that come to mind when you say that, and one is when you just look at residential investment, means that you've got a rental property that you rent out to someone else. And the first thing that comes to mind is all the difficulty, challenges, expenses or complications that go with that. And that is, on the face of it, you look at the income and let's just say it's worth $350 a week. That's great. With that, normally you'll have your loan repayments, that then you're going to have insurance, then you're going to have maintenance, then you're going to have property management fees, and you're going to have all the things that come out that affect the cash flow. So it's not like you're just going to earn your $350 a week. Some weeks, you might actually get $300 in your hand, but for the week. But sometimes you might not get any, or you might only get $100 a week. So it's pretty complicated, and that sort of goes back to why I said at the very start, if you haven't got an investment that, number one, has good serviceability throughout the time that you've got it, and that means the revenue versus all the expenses. So you've got the serviceability, but then if you haven't got some sort of a plan or anticipation for capital growth, then you do have to question why you're doing it in the first place. So yeah, I was discussing this with my mate this morning as well, and that is with the back to that stat, with 10, if he's got 10 sellers, 5 of them are investment property owners that are selling their investments, and there's only 1 to 1.5 investors that are picking up those properties that have been sold as investment properties. So the question being, is there a shift in people's views towards property as an investment compared to what we've seen over the previous 4 or 5 decades? So between 1960 and 2010, every year religiously we saw 7 to 10 years properties double in value, and it was a safe as houses investment. That's the term. But the 10 years between 2010 and 2020 has really rewritten the history books, and we haven't seen property values double. We have interest rates now. Obviously, I mean, money's super cheap, but right now, over the last 10 years, we may have had the situation where the serviceability hasn't looked that bad over a 10-year period in terms of revenue versus the expenses, but certainly from a capital growth point of view, it hasn't looked good at all. And in fact, in many cases, it's looked worse than not good. It's actually been bad because properties have fallen in price, yet you've still been having to service it as well. So people would question, why am I even doing this? As I said, historically, it's always been great. It's always been a safe as houses investment, but the last 10 years has certainly taught us something different. So does that affect people's investment decisions moving forward? Absolutely, I think it does.
And the other thing that I picked up with regard to that and investment, I think it might have been a Reserve Bank report where the suggestion is that our rates at the moment, we talk about buying and selling, but more particularly for those that are entertaining the idea of buying. One of the things that was picked up during, as I said, I picked up during the week, it might have been this week or last, but rates are low, and they are saying with regard to what's happened with the overall economy, what's happening on a worldwide basis, what's happening to the business world, they don't see interest rates rising for another 2-3 years, if they do, even then. So all of a sudden it becomes affordable. All of a sudden it becomes a little bit real as to, hey, if there's not been an opportunity to buy in the past, this has got to be an opportunity which I would suggest at some point is going to start driving the marketplace. We talk about how good it is at the moment and what's going on with our sales stats, which are only, 76% right? What'd you say? Can't remember now. What'd you say?
It was 73.6%, 72.6%.
So, but what's interesting is that, when that sort of commentary is being released by our central bank, the Reserve Bank, that's sort of a pretty good indicator to say, obviously there's lending criteria that you've got to address, but it suddenly opens up an opportunity, doesn't it, for be it a first home buyer, or be it someone who wants to upgrade, or be it someone who wants to downsize. It will be an interesting time ahead with regard to what happens with the property market as far as buyers and sellers are concerned. And in my opinion, based on on that suggestion that the interest rates to borrow money is not going to be jumping up in any way anytime soon.
Yeah, look, I agree. I mean, who knows what the next 2 years look like, and we certainly didn't know what the last 8 or 9 months as well. With the last 8 months, like all of 2020, who would have predicted any of that? So, and COVID probably isn't going to disappear anytime in the next 6 or 12 months anyway. So who knows what havoc that might cause. But money being cheap is a really, really good thing in terms of just daily living and any borrowing that needs to happen. The cynical side is, well, if the Reserve Bank is just suggesting that it's going to be so cheap for so long, what does that say about their economic outlook in terms of, they just anticipate things are going to be pretty tough. But ATB, I bumped into in my Perth morning walk this morning, I bumped into a Geraldtonian as well, and we got who's just down in Perth for the weekend, and we got talking about the building industry, the result, and this is all around WA. And the result of the stimuluses that have been put in place a couple of months ago by both the federal and state government. And obviously there's been a great reaction to land sales and now the building industry as well. So that's all really, really positive on an economic front. But when we consider that in a real estate, actually no, sticking with the economic front, one comment that was made to me as an example is, builders have been overrun, absolutely smashed. That being in Geraldton, I know that's the case in Perth and certainly in the southwest as well. So they've been smashed as a result of the land sales, which is primarily totally fueled by the stimuluses provided by the government. But builders apparently are where they would normally commit to building 250 homes in a year. Because of this massive demand, they've actually committed to much more than that. And I think the figure was double. So they've committed to, say, 500 homes instead of the 250 homes that they'd be able to handle at a maximum. And then they put pressure on themselves to deliver. Now, we all know that the builder is going to be as good as the tradies that they can get. And so we can see that there's high demand for tradies, so that's good for employment and good for the construction industry. But you have to have the people available. Those same people, as we know, those tradies, when things were quiet, typically they were sitting there going, well, where are we going to earn the money from? And so they were heading over to the FIFO lifestyle because that paid really, really well and gave them in part a decent lifestyle. And we've almost got a bit of a semi-mining boom going on as well. So where I'm going with all this is it's a great stimulus at the start in terms of economically it's a good thing. I think it's going to put a bit of a strain on the builders as to how are they going to get the tradies to build all these houses. But then if we jump 18 months, maybe 2 years down the track, and we've got a massive increase in all these houses in these outer areas as well, I might add, what normally happens when we flood the market with all these properties, and if there's an economic downturn because we haven't felt the effect or the full effect of what COVID has done to our economy, and people are forced to sell properties, and there's I don't know. It's a bit cynical, and I'm normally Mr. Optimism, but I'm just sitting there going, it's good for the economy what's happening right here and now, but in a year and a half or 2 years' time, is it going to be a good thing for the economy? Is it going to be a good thing for the real estate market? There's a question mark.
Yeah, it is, and that's something that we I think we've made, if we go back a few episodes, I think that's something we've discussed previously. It's a point that we've made previously. It's certainly a point that you've made previously about, the impact that can have. And we're talking to someone who's qualified. I mean, your qualifications as a licensed valuer obviously gives you some expertise as far as that awareness and that knowledge is concerned. And it's certainly, I mean, it's just basic economics, really. I mean, the old supply and demand eventually. And don't forget, in a way, when we had that mining boom, the place went nuts. And I think we forgot to at times, perhaps people sort of weren't necessarily thinking in a conservative way, got carried away with the emotion of it all and the opportunity of it all. But of course, then look what happened there when the market suddenly slowed, and in fact near stopped here in WA. You've got to be a little careful. Certainly it's still affordable. Certainly it's still an opportunity. Certainly there are things. But you're talking about the building, and that person that you were talking about who was a German person, I just written her name down because I reckon I know who it was that you saw this morning. And she would be an ideal guest to have on board to have a chat about things property. It's not all about real estate, is it? Pardon?
You said you've just written her name down. I said I met a person. I didn't tell you it was a her or him.
No, but I'm reading between the lines. I reckon I know where you got that information from.
Okay.
Just a thought. But just getting back to your reference about the building and the information that you discussed along the riverfront this morning with your friends, there was an article on ABC News, and the headline was free airfares, accommodation. This is the headline on ABC News, which I sort of feel is pretty reliable in most cases. Free airfares, accommodation to lure interstate workers to WA as home building booms. And the article was exactly that. The WA home building boom is pushing some construction companies to look interstate for workers and offer up to huge incentives, including airfares and accommodation to lure them. Once again, that highlights what we've been talking about with regard to the pressure on the rental market.
That's right.
And I've heard a similar situation. One of my staff who'd been with me for a long, long time is now up there with her husband up in Karratha. And she was telling me, so they moved up there September, October. And the deal is with Rio, they find them a home that suits them and they check that home and, yep, that'll work for us. She was telling me only a couple of weeks ago that situation in Karratha, there are workers up there at the moment who are still sitting in wherever it is that they are waiting for their accommodation be available because there is just being inundated. There's the markets similar to what we were talking about in Geraldton and what we're experiencing in Perth. Yeah. So there's these guys going up there to work. There's this large company that, Rio as an example, and there's other mining companies that I'm sure would be similar. But, she knows of people similar to her, what her circumstances were, but they're still waiting. They can't get a property. They've since gone up there and say this year and nothing available. So that's that flow on that we're talking about.
Yeah, I might do a bit of digging over this next week, just in terms of what's going on up there, and draw some sort of comparison with what we saw happen from, say, 2002, 2003, in terms of that we had massive rental spike and property value spike, and then, as we know, it fell off a cliff. But now it's bounced back up as well. I might go and find some legitimate stats as to what's happened and what is happening right now, just so we can work out whether people have learnt from the past or whether they don't really care about the past. They're only living for the now. And right now, if the jobs are there, if the mines, if the iron ore's there, and people are buying the iron ore, all the past, it doesn't matter. Like it's not even a choice to consider the past and try and learn from the past, because if the mines are there and if they're able to sell their product, and it's also looking at the international trade as well. But I guess that's a whole nother story to discuss what's going on there with China, because I don't know.
And of course, the other thing is, and I just got a message from Harves because he's down at Mandurah. And he's just said here, trying to get a rental in Mandurah is almost impossible. And they were fortunate, and he's, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but he's that market where they've retired, decided we're going to do something else, be close to some of their family, and trying to build. So there's that. What we were talking about earlier on, the fact of that marketplace that are trying to build. we need to rent in between times, sell the house. Oh, hang on, we need somewhere to live while all this other activity is going on. The other thing being is, thanks, Harv, we appreciate your comment, but the other thing that I make reference to with all this as well, and the building industry that we refer to, is that in turn then is going to have another flow-on effect, which is the driving wages up. And remember, we got to that point with the mining industry where people were working in various trades and different industries and going, well, hang on, I'm going to the mining industry because I can get $100 a week more or $200 a week more. All of a sudden, is that situation, I mean, it's probably not necessarily our expertise, but you can see where that's perhaps going to drive that market as well. And suddenly you're paying big bucks, where does that then, there's got to be a flow-on effect on the cost of building your house.
Well, you see, that's my point. That's my exact point. I reckon that's happening right now, because I think the builders are out there, and maybe we need to get a builder on, but I think the builders are out there. They've obviously been run over the last couple of months, and then they have to commit to a price, obviously, for building these homes. But then they need to get the contract, the trades to do their respective bits, and a lot of those tradies are going to be excited by the money they can earn up north, and therefore their price goes up as trades if they're going to actually stay as tradies. But has that been factored into the building prices as well? So I think, yeah, that absolutely is a show in itself. Let's find a builder and get the inside word as to how that's actually going to work over the next 12 months.
Yep, I've just written that down. And I think the other point, and I've had this discussion, we've raised this before, and I've certainly spoken to Dino with regard to this. We had a client similar, but I had another scenario, a couple of scenarios this week where, need to be careful if you're entering into, it's now end of August, if you're entering into a contract to buy land and you're intending to get a hold of these building incentives, then you need to be very, very sure and certainly get independent advice if you possibly can. I know a couple of people that are available to do that, but you certainly want to be sure that that land is available. You want to be very, very careful if you're suddenly waiting for that land to be released, because there's every chance. There's no. People say, how long does that take? How long is a piece of string? We could have all the best intentions in the world, but there's so many other third parties involved in that process. So the closer we get to the December, the less likelihood that you're going to be in that field. And suddenly you could be planning to build based on the fact that you qualify for $45,000 being the federal and the state packages. But if your land's not available and therefore you haven't got a building package in place, you've got a problem. They are things that you need to be very, very conscious of.
Yeah, man, I'm just looking at the time. As I don't know how often you watch the time of the show, but I just looked up and I saw where we're at, and I thought I can't wait for your question. However, one other thing I thought I better mention, just given that this has been a rental based show, something that's going to come up within the next month is the emergency period so far as the moratorium on evictions is concerned, and also basically that. At this point in time, this very minute, that's due to expire on the 29th of September in our state. However, that is under review right now as to what's going to happen with that. So I reckon by next week, there'll be some solid word from the government as to what that looks like. And ultimately, is that going to be extended so far as rentals or not? And if it is, under what conditions? So as soon as there's a lot of speculation going on out there that I've heard and seen amongst the real estate agents, but that's not really worth anything. We need to hear it from the government, and I reckon we might hear something in the next 7 days.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that, shall we? Hey, listen, just quickly before I do my if question, and I do keep an eye on the time. I go, oh my God. But as I said, we've got a passion about property, and it is about Property Avenue WA. We've got a few guests lined up for the next few weeks, so we'll follow that through and ensure we've got it sorted. Unfortunately, because we changed our program to Saturday morning, a couple of our guests we had organised had children's sport on, which we sometimes forget at times. So there's that commitment as well. But just quickly, Dean Stonehouse made mention too, Dino, don't be surprised some mortgagee in possession stock coming to the market soon as well. There's a possibility that comes to the market. So that's a good point. But we won't go in any further with that. We'll keep that for a discussion another time. But just quickly, what I wanted to raise before I give you the if question, it was quite sad this week for particularly those in the Midwest region and those in the real estate market, I'm sure. A friend of ours and a principal of the professionals up here in Geraldton, in Cyril McKenzie. I met Cyril. His father-in-law and my dad were great mates, and when we used to come up to Geraldton and have a beer with our respective, or his father-in-law, my dad, and it was sort of that. We weren't bosom buddies, but we obviously had a lot to do with each other in the business sense and those days. And sadly, he passed. He's had a long illness. He was also, I used to see him regularly out at the golf course when I'd go for a run, and Cyril was out there. So to family, Pete and Elby and all the family, we pass on our best wishes, and we're thinking of you all. And we're thinking also of the staff at the professionals in Geraldton, because he was a fabulous bloke, a good supporter of the industry, and a very positive man. So we wish all the family well.
Yeah, to TV, I won't say any more, mate. I think you summed it up really well. But our best regards to Peter and Albie and all the professionals' family, and Cyril's wife as well.
Yep.
Absolutely couldn't find a nicer guy, and very well respected in the whole real estate industry, not just in Geraldton. So very, very sad part, another good one gone.
Yep, absolutely. Mate, on a more lighter note, we always like to finish up with an if question. And I think I've got a doozy today. Absolutely simple, but a doozy.
Hit me.
If you had to teach something, what would you teach?
If I had to, what? If I had to teach something?
If you had to teach something, teach, as be a teacher, teach, what would you teach?
What? Sorry, if I was a teacher, or what about?
No. If you had to, not as a teacher, but if you had to teach something, right? Whether it be your children, your staff, whatever. If you had to teach something, what would you teach?
Have to be like one word. One word.
No, it's up to you.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we're fast running out of time, but that's okay.
I'll be quick. I would teach approachability and communication.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Communication is, and this is not a bullshit stat, communication is the #1 skill in the world. Across every single country, across every single ethnic background, communication is absolutely the #1 skill in the world, in whatever format it is. So I would love to teach communication, and I think that approachability is super, super important as well, and actually impacts the way that we communicate.
Well, that's really interesting, because Dean Stonehouse, he's come back, and Dino's come back and said he'd like if he had to teach, he'd teach common sense. And this goes to, welcome. We've just had someone who's just come on board. I like this. This is a man that likes to beat you up on a squash court, in fact. Richie Howard. Yes. Hi, Rich. Good to hear from you. We are winding up. But he sort of said financial literacy to school kids. I think that's a really, really good one. Financial literacy to school. Richard Howan, who's an accountant in town, as you know, a well-respected accountant in town, he would teach financial literacy to school kids. I reckon I've said that for a long time. And one Judy, who we know very, very well, and I've actually written down, this is what I've written down that I'm going to, that I would teach: respect, and I'm serious about this one, customer service. I would love to teach customer service, because I have a passion about that, other than real estate matters and property matters. I have a real thing about customer service, and I would really, really be, that's something. But when I wrote down respect, I've just got a little message up here from one Judy Viner who said she would teach respect. So how's that?
Mate,
Stars align.
No, that's fantastic. You guys should get married. Maybe you guys were meant to be together.
I know. That's a thought. Mate, we've got to go. Been an absolute pleasure once again. And to all those, Rich, fabulous to have you on board, and anybody else that's been watching. Really, we're going to do this every Saturday and see how this goes, Saturday morning. We've got a few other plans in place. I'm catching up with a friend of mine next week. I'm heading to Perth, and we might even try and do it on the bloody foreshore, mate. Mate, that's an option. Down at South Perth tomorrow, next Saturday. But we're definitely sort of working towards also getting a podcast happening, converting this to podcast. So we'll still do our live, but also look at doing a podcast because there's a bit of interest happening there. So watch this space. Let people know where we're at, what we do, and we would love you to share this. As I said, we're not selling anything. We're trying to provide some support and some information and some direction when it comes to matters about property in WA. So thanks for joining us. Please take care. Please enjoy your week. It was just an accident that cat's banner scarf was hanging over the top there, but what can I say? And OD, been a pleasure, mate. Have a great week and really enjoy you being on board.
Awesome.
I will just...